From Deloitte Tax, welcome to the Tax News and Views podcast. In this series, we talk to specialists from Deloitte about the latest business issues and developments. I'm Carrie Falkenhayn, your host for Tax News and Views. And joining me today for a special edition podcast to talk about the tax provisions included in President Biden's recently released fiscal 24 budget are John Traub and Anna Taylor. Listeners are likely familiar with John's insights on policy matters, given his role on Capitol Hill prior to joining Deloitte, and we are thrilled to have Anna join us as well. She recently joined the Deloitte Tax Policy Group after serving as the Director of Economic Policy, Tax, and Trade Counsel to Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. So Anna and John, great to speak with you both again.
Good to be here.
All right. So this week, President Biden, as I said, released his long-awaited fiscal year 24 budget proposal. So Anna, from a tax perspective, what do we need to know about it?
Well, I don't think there are a lot of surprises for people in this new budget. There are a lot of recycled ideas that were in the budget over the last year or two, taking the corporate rate to 28%, a new minimum tax on very high net worth individuals that applies to both realized and unrealized income, higher marginal rates for taxpayers making over $400,000, repealing the oil and gas tax incentives, and then international reforms that are intended to get to Pillar 2 compliance. So these are all provisions that were expected and are included. I will say, though, that while these provisions have been around and have been discussed for quite a while, they may not be identical to prior year proposals, especially in the international space. There are some small but important changes, and folks should really pay attention to those changes. And, it's important to read the Green Book carefully to understand exactly where the administration's thinking is on this at this point to ensure that you understand where the proposals stand now. There's also a few new ideas. One in particular that's interesting. There's a 30% tax on energy used to mine cryptocurrencies. There's roughly $4.7 trillion total in tax increases in this budget. It's a big number. It's offset with tax relief for some taxpayers. It nets to about $4 trillion in higher taxes overall. And the administration contends that this will help shore up Social Security and Medicare and reduce the budget deficit.
Wow, 4.7 trillion is a lot of tax hikes. John, which of these do we see actually getting enacted?
Probably none, although I think it's always important to keep in mind that in the congressional horse trading, there's always some give and take. And one that I would say has a possibility later in this year to find a home, I'm not saying it's likely again, but it's possible, is the administration proposes to increase the excise tax on stock buybacks enacted last year at 1%. They want to raise that to 4%. That's an item I could see some Republicans agreeing to in exchange for something else they really want in exchange. Just step back one level to me. What is interesting to me is when I began in politics, you'd often hear Democrats talk about all the investments they want to make, the spending they want to do to make the country a better place. And they would mumble under their breath, but we have tax increases to pay for it. And we've really emerged into a new era in which it's no longer hidden, but now it is trumpeted that we are doing big tax increases on disfavored groups. And that's more of an applause line than a footnote buried at the end of a campaign document. And I think it's an interesting transition in where the tax policy debate is going in the minds, at least of Democrats, and how they think they're being perceived by voters.
I would agree. Anna, so what happens next? We have the budget. What do we need to be looking for?
So there are going to be hearings with Secretary Yellen coming before both the Ways and Means Committee today, as we're recording, where I think you can expect to see some tense exchanges potentially between Secretary Yellen and the new House Republican majority on the committee, particularly around the overall size of the tax increases and how the IRS is going to use the nearly $80 billion in funding over the next decade that was provided in last year's Inflation Reduction Act. In addition to today's hearing, you'll see Secretary Yellen over in the Senate next week, where she'll do the same thing. And then after that, honestly, they're probably this document will be used mostly for campaign fodder over the next several months because, clearly Democrats and Republicans in the House aren't going to agree on this document as it stands right now.
Yeah, understood. So, John, Anna mentioned some tax benefits out there. Were any of those to fix the R&D tax issue where under Section 174, those costs need to be capitalized? And we talked about that topic a lot last year.
Yeah, we're going to still keep talking about it. The answer is not directly, but maybe. So in the president's budget, he proposes to repeal FDII, the Foreign Derived Intangible Income regime. And I think that raises roughly $160 billion by repealing that. And then the budget proposes to spend an equivalent number of dollars on R&D incentives, which are totally not spelled out, but one could imagine one of the things they may use the money for is to alleviate the impact on corporate America of the changes in 174 that took place last year. But in terms of whether that gets done through Congress, we remain in the same box we were last year, which is this is a provision that has lots of broad, deep, bipartisan support, but Democrats are reluctant to address this unless it's paired with some meaningful lower and middle class family tax relief. And they've been sort of focused on some of the enhancements to the child tax credit first enacted in the American Rescue Plan 2 years ago in 2021. And Republicans were reluctant to do that last year. And so that seems to remain a sticking point that both sides have to get the comfort on if we're going to see action on 174, regardless of where it sits in the president's budget.
Got it. John, we also saw some action on the debt limit this week. So what has happened and what does it tell us about where that debate is going to continue to go?
Yeah, the Ways and Means Committee yesterday marked up what I think is a pretty interesting bill. The proposal is basically, its shorthand is debt prioritization, meaning we're going to sort of take the incoming dollars coming to the Treasury and allocate them out on a priority basis. So the first priority is paying bondholders, Social Security, and Medicare. Second priority is veterans in the military. Third priority, if there's still money left over, is sort of everything else, education, transportation, et cetera, everything else government does. And the fourth priority at the lowest tier is salaries for the president and for members of Congress. Now, it's not clear to me Treasury has the technical capacity to implement this. They process millions of payments a day, and figuring out which tier each one of these payments goes into is something that it's unclear that their computers can be programmed to handle. The bill's not likely to go anywhere in the Senate. I think Democrats are going to complain bitterly that this is a pay China first bill, given how large of a bondholder China is with our creditors. And it prioritizes paying off bondholders in Wall Street before it prioritizes things like food safety inspectors or air traffic control or keeping our national parks open. But to me, it's a sign that Republicans are sort of going through the steps of showing their members, look, here are things we've tried to make the debt limit sort of easier to swallow. And it's going through the stages of acceptance before Republicans say, okay, we will vote to raise the debt limit, which we don't really want to do, but there's sort of no other alternative out there. So it may get some attention in the press. I don't think it's a meaningful bill in the sense it's not going to pass the Senate, but it does show Republicans are trying to give their members a variety of things they can vote for and stand behind on the route to passing a debt limit increase.
It'll be interesting to see how the various actions that the parties take as they work towards resolving the debt limit over the next couple months. So thank you for that. And thank you, Anna, for the background on the budget. I assume we will not speak again because it's unlikely that this legislation goes through as it's planned right now, but I'm sure there will be other topics that will come up, including what ends up happening with the debt limit. So stay tuned, audience, more to come. If people would like more information, you can subscribe to an email version of Tax News and Views. Just go on Deloitte.com. You can also download the Tax at Hand app on your favorite app store. And on that app, you'll see a number of postings that include tax policy items. And finally, you can connect with John or Anna directly via LinkedIn. And we hope you tune in here for future policy editions. In the meantime, thank you all for listening in, and I hope everyone continues to be well.